Today, the world celebrates World Blood Donors Day, and you're welcome on the news. We begin with Houthi missile strike injures one sailor, sets ship ablaze. Russia announces trial for U.S. journalists over CIA work. New U.S. sanctions force Russia to end dollar-euro trading. G7 approves 50 billion US dollars loan for Ukraine from Russian assets. And Hamas official unsure of Israeli hostages still alive. The U.S. Central Command CENTCOM said in a statement on Thursday that two cruise missiles launched by Yemen's Houthi rebels have hit a bulk cargo carrier in the Gulf of Aden, extremely wounded one of the crew. The Houthis, who are locked in a war with a Saudi-led coalition after removing Yemen's internationally recognized government from Sana'a in 2014, since November 2023, have been aiming vessels with alleged Israeli contacts in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. They say the action is in solidarity with the Palestinians over Israel war on Gaza, in which at least 37,232 people have been killed. The Iran-backed group on Thursday said it had carried out attacks on 3 ships over 24 hours, including on the Verbena, in retaliation to the crimes committed against our people in the Gaza Strip and in response to the American-British aggression against our country. Earlier on Thursday, the British military's United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operation (MTO) Centre said a vessel had been attacked and caught fire after private security firm Ambrey said a merchant vessel made a radio distress call saying it had been struck by a missile. The Houthis later claimed the attack on the Verbena as well as attacks on 2 other ships in the Red Sea. The Houthis had launched 2 ballistic missiles in the Red Sea that caused no injuries or significant damage, Central Command said. The Verbena was loaded with timber and was on its way from Malaysia to Italy, according to CENTCOM. Security and military sources said, according to reports, that the Verbena still had power and steering capabilities. Thursday's attack marks the Houthis' second direct hit on a merchant ship in 2 days. They claimed a series of small watercraft and missile attacks a day earlier that left a Tutor, a Greek-owned coal carrier, taken in water near Hodeidah and in need of rescue. The Philippines Department of Foreign Affairs condemned the assault on the Tutor, whose crew included Filipinos. The Houthi campaign in the Red Sea region has interrupted international shipping, causing delays and added to international supply chain costs. The rebels have sunk 1 ship, seized another vessel, and killed 3 seafarers in separate attacks. Shipping companies, meanwhile, have redirected their vessels around the southern tip of Africa, adding further 3,000 to 3,500 nautical miles, 5,400 to 6,500 kilometers to their route. U.S. journalist Evan Gershkovich will face trial in the Ural city of Yekaterinburg, where he was detained over a year ago after he was accused of working for the CIA, Russian prosecutors have said. The Prosecutor General's office said in a statement that Gershkovich, 32, is accused of gathering secret information on orders from the CIA about Uralvagazonzavod, a facility that produces repairs military equipment, disclosing for the first time the details of the accusations against him. The statement gave no dates for the trial. On March 29, 2023, Gershkovich, a journalist with the Wall Street Journal, has been in jail since he was arrested in Yekaterinburg, about 1,400 kilometers, that's 870 miles east of Moscow, and was accused of spying. He denies any wrongdoing. Following the Russian announcement, reports said he was facing a false and baseless charge. The United States designated Gershkovich wrongfully detained in April 2023, and President Joe Biden has called his detention totally illegal. Lotto and Tucker said they now expect the U.S. government to step up efforts to secure his release. Matthew Miller, U.S. State Department spokesperson, said Washington will continue to work to bring Gershkovich back home. Now, new U.S. sanctions against Russia have triggered an instant suspension of trading in dollars and euros on the country's leading financial marketplace, the Moscow Exchange. On Wednesday, a public holiday in Russia, the exchange known as MOEX And the Russian central bank rushed out statements within an hour of Washington announcing a new round of sanctions targeted at cutting the flow of money and goods to sustain Moscow's war in Ukraine. The central bank said due to the introduction of restrictive measures by the United States against the Moscow Exchange Group, exchange trading and settlements of deliverable instruments in US dollars and euros are suspended. The step means banks, companies and investors will no longer be able to trade either currency via a central exchange, which offers advantages such as better liquidity and oversight. Instead, they will have to trade over the counter where deals are conducted directly between two parties. The central bank said it will use data from those trades to set official exchange rates. Numerous Russians hold savings in dollars or euros, mindful of periodic crises in recent decades when the ruble has crashed in value. The central bank reassured people these deposits were secure. With Moscow pursuing closer trade and political relations with Beijing, China's yuan has ousted the dollar to become MOEX's most traded currency, accounting for 53.6% of all foreign currency traded in May. Dollar to ruble trading volume on MOEX tends to be around 1 billion rubles, that's 11 million US dollars a day, while euro ruble trading hovers at around 300 million rubles, that's 3 million US dollars daily. For yuan ruble trading, daily volumes now regularly top 8 billion rubles, that's 90 million US dollars. The G7 has agreed to use frozen Russian assets to raise 50 billion US dollars, that's 39 billion euros, for Ukraine to assist it fight invading Russian forces. US President Joe Biden said it was another reminder to Russia that we are not backing down, but Moscow has threatened extremely painful, vengeful measures. The money is not anticipated to arrive until the end of the year, but is seen as a long-term solution to funding Ukraine's war efforts and economy. Also at the G7 summit in Italy, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Biden signed a 10-year bilateral security deal between Ukraine and the US, lauded by Kyiv as historic. The agreement emphasizes US military and training aid to Ukraine, but it does not commit Washington to send troops to fight for its ally. Some 325 billion US dollars worth of assets were frozen by the G7 alongside the EU following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The port of assets is generating about 3 billion US dollars a year in interest. Under the G7 plan, the 3 billion US dollars will be used to pay off the yearly interest of the 50 billion US dollars loan for Ukrainians seeking out on the international markets. Speaking at a joint news conference at the summit's venue in Puglia, southern Italy, President Biden said the 50 billion US dollars loan will put that money to work for Ukraine, and said another reminder to Russian President Vladimir Putin that we are not backing down. The US leader stressed that Putin cannot wait us out. He cannot divide us, and will be with Ukraine until they prevail in this war. President Zelensky appreciated his American and other allies for their unwavering support, and referring to the new security deal, he said, "It's a truly historic day, and we have signed the strongest agreement within Ukraine and the US since our independence in 1991. The G7 group of rich nations, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the UK and US, have been important financial and military supporters of Ukraine as it battles to contain occupying Russian forces." Other G7 leaders also praised the 50 billion US dollars loan deal with UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, describing it as game-changing. The 50 billion US dollars loan is a sizable pot of money when compared with the 61 billion US dollars worth of US military aid that was finally agreed in May. On Israel-Gaza war, the fate of the 120 remaining hostages in Gaza is key to any deal to end the prolonged and bloody battle between Israel and Hamas. But a senior Hamas official has said no one has an idea how many of them are still alive, and that any deal to release them must include guarantees of a permanent ceasefire and the total extraction of Israeli forces from Gaza. Osama Hamdan, Hamas spokesperson and political bureau member, offered an insight into the militant group's position on the delayed ceasefire talks a view on whether Hamas regrets its decision to attack Israel given the rising Palestinian death toll, and a commentary on the leak earlier this week of messages from its chief in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, the man deemed to be the ultimate decision maker on any peace deal. The U.S. believes that Hamas holds the key to the talks. The haggling has to top, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said, according to reports on Thursday, urging Sinwar to end the war. While speaking in the Lebanese capital Beirut, Hamdan said the newest proposal on the table, an Israeli plan that was first publicly announced by U.S. President Joe Biden late last month, did not meet the group's demands for an end to the war. He said Hamas required a clear position from Israel to accept the ceasefire, a complete withdrawal from Gaza, and let the Palestinians to determine their future by themselves, the reconstruction, the lifting of the siege, and we are ready to talk about a fair deal, about the prisoners exchange. Deliberations over the U.S.-backed proposal have increased in recent days, but appear to grind to a pause on Wednesday after Hamas presented its response to the document 12 days after receiving it. Blinken stated frustration over what he said was Hamas's decision to submit numerous changes, describing some of them as ongoing beyond position Hamas had previously taken. The U.S.-backed ceasefire plan that was approved by the United Nations Security Council on Monday lays out a phased approach. In the first phase, there will be a 6-week ceasefire in which some hostages will be exchanged for Palestinian prisoners, and the Israeli military will pull out of populated areas in Gaza. The second phase, permanent end to the war and full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, will only be implemented after further negotiations between the two sides. But Hamdan said the duration of the ceasefire was a major issue for Hamas, which is worried that Israel has no plan of following through with the second phase of the deal. The end of hostilities must be permanent, he said, and Israel must withdraw from Gaza completely. On more stories, Justice Department says Phoenix police used too much force. The U.S. Justice Department has said Phoenix police engaged in an array of misbehavior that violated the civil rights of the city's residents, including unjustified deadly force. In a mocking report, the federal agency detailed cases of excessive force and discrimination against Black, Hispanic, and Native American residents. According to the allegations, officers also unlawfully detained, ticketed, and arrested homeless people, but a top police union official called the investigation illogical. Meanwhile, the Phoenix Police Department said they were analyzing the report. They said they were committed to continuous improvement by enhancing policy, accountability, and training in the nation's fifth largest city. Thursday's Justice Department findings are a culmination of a closely 3-year probe by the agency into abuse allegations dating from 2016. Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clark said this behavior includes improper use of tasers, projectiles, leg restraints, police dogs, and even deadly force, including guns and neck restraints and compression restraints. The finding revealed evidence showing long-standing dysfunction that reflects a lack of effective supervision, training, and accountability, she said. A local officers union, the Phoenix Fraternal Order of Police Lodge 2, said the report was misleading. President of the occasion, Lou Manganillo, said the findings were full of half-truths, unsubstantiated accusations, and haphazard, illogical conclusions. The Justice Department report also found Phoenix police unlawfully detained, cited, and arrested homeless people and unlawfully disposed of their belongings. The reports find that between 2016 to 2022, 37% of Phoenix police arrests were homeless people. The Justice Department also accused Phoenix police of firing their guns at people who did not pose an immediate threat, as well as putting themselves in situations of tactical disadvantage that substantially increase the likelihood they will fire their weapons. On climate crisis, climate protesters ready in Italy for G7 meeting. On Thursday, dozens of international demonstrators assembled in Puglia to prepare for this Saturday's protest against the G7 summit that is taking place in Borgo Egnazia. Italy is hosting the summit of the group of 7 leading industrialized nations hosted by Italian Premier Giorgia Meloni. In Fatiza Ardonio, at one of 3 campsites activists have assembled, protesters are preparing banners for the demonstration while holding thematic panels on international summit issues. The campsite chosen by the protesters is a symbolic place. It is an area reforested by the community that has been living for years in conflict with the nearby Posh Technical Center, a giant raisin ring that recently made headlines for the European Commission's rejection of a project signed with the Puglia region that will have involved the exportation of additional adjoining land and the eradication of hectares of Asian Dianu forest trees. The G7 summit through Saturday is concentrating on war conflicts, the spread of artificial intelligence, and on Africa issues, mainly Italy's long-standing concern about uncontrolled migration to Europe from the continent. Perennial issues such as climate change in China also will be discussed. The G7 is an informal forum with an annual summit to discuss economic policy and security issues. The members are Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, and the United States. On politics in Africa, ANC says it has broad agreements with the opposition and others in South Africa. On Thursday, South Africa's African National Congress Party ANC said it has a broad agreement with the major opposition and other parties to form a coalition government and end a political deadlock after the ANC lost its 30-year majority in an election 2 weeks ago. The announcement came on the eve of the first sitting of South Africa's new parliament, when lawmakers will elect a president. The ANC needs assistance from other parties to re-elect President Cyril Ramaphosa for a second and final term. Fikile Mbalula, ANC Secretary General, said according to reports that the major opposition Democratic Alliance and others had agreed on the fundamental principle of forming a government of national unity with the ANC, but he noted that final details of the agreement had not yet been finalized. Mbalula said the framework of the agreement will possibly be made public on Friday. A broad agreement was the first priority of the ANC to get Ramaphosa re-elected with the help of others. I'll take a quick break, and when I come back, I'll bring you more stories. That's Duma Nigeria. Don't go anywhere. You are welcome back. Let's continue. Tinubu says we'll pay minimum wage we can afford. President Bola Tinubu has said the federal government will set a fresh national minimum wage based on what the country can afford. He said this on Wednesday night at the 25th Democracy Day anniversary dinner at the Presidential Villa in Abuja. Speaking to the leaders of the National Assembly, represented by Senate President Godswill Akpabio, the president said the government will do what is expected and pay what it can afford. The president acknowledged Nigeria's complexity and diversity and stressed that democratic governance remains the best route to success in any country. He said bandit activities stop farmers from high productivity must end for the country to fully benefit from the initiatives introduced by his administration to tame food prices. Tinubu reiterated that Nigeria can feed its citizens, adding that the nation will be extremely successful if all citizens unite to pass on the charter of Nigeria's value system. And finally, on the news on health issues, NCDC alerts on cholera outbreak, records 30 deaths. The Nigeria Center for Disease Control and Prevention, NCDC, has alerted on rising cholera cases nationwide, with 30 deaths, 1,141 alleged cases, and 65 confirmed cases reported. Dr. Jide Idris, the Director General of the Center, revealing this in a public advisory, said the cases that occurred between January and June 11, 2024, were reported from 96 local government areas in 30 states. He stated that the 10 states that contributed 90% to the burden of cholera include Bayelsa, Zamfara, Abia, Cross River, Bauchi, Delta, Katsina, Imo, Nasarawa, and Lagos states. He urged Nigerians to be cautious of the rising trend of cholera cases across the country as the rainy season increases. He explained that cholera is a food and waterborne disease caused by the ingestion of the organism Vibrio cholerae in contaminated water and food, adding that water is usually contaminated by the feces of infected individuals. He listed people at risk, including people of all ages living in places with limited access to clean water, amongst others, adding that disease can be prevented by ensuring access to safe, portable drinking water, proper sanitation and waste disposal, and appropriate hygiene, including hand washing. Idris advised Nigerians to reduce the risk of cholera by making sure water is boiled and stored in a clean, covered container before drinking. He said people should practice good personal hygiene, hand hygiene, by washing their hands often with soap under clean running water, making sure food is well cooked before consumption, avoiding open defecation, indiscriminate refuse dumping, ensure proper disposal of waste and frequent clearing of sewage, amongst others. He urged health workers to always practice standard safety precautions, for instance, wearing gloves while handling patients or providing care to an ill patient or relative, and intensify surveillance efforts to punctually report suspected cholera cases. Another look at the top stories. Houthi missile strike injures one sailor, sets ship ablaze. Russia announces trial for U.S. journalists over CIA work. New U.S. sanctions force Russia to end dollar-euro trading. G7 approves $50 billion loan for Ukraine from Russian assets, and Hamas official unsure of Israeli hostages still alive. Still 20 years of celebrating, giving, and thank you for blood donors. And that's all on the news. Have a blessed weekend ahead.